welcome. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Or, I might show up at your door. I'm just here to share some creepy stories, so sit back and enjoy. Disclaimer: the content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. It started with the rain. A relentless downpour pounded against my windshield, reducing the world outside to a blurry mess of dark trees and cracked asphalt. My wipers struggled to keep up, each swipe barely clearing enough visibility before the storm reclaimed its hold. The road stretched endlessly in front of me, an unlit ribbon cutting through the void of nowhere. I wasn't even supposed to be here. I'd taken a detour to avoid a massive highway accident, thinking a scenic route through the countryside would be quicker. A mistake. I hadn't seen another car in over an hour, and the gas gauge was edging closer to empty. The road was narrow, flanked by dense forests on either side, and the only signs of civilization were the occasional weathered barns and rusting fences that seemed abandoned long ago. Then my radio crackled. A sudden burst of static filled the car, making me jump. I hadn't been listening to anything. It was just me, the rain, and the hum of my tires against the road. But the radio had turned on by itself. A robotic voice cut through the static, flat and monotone. Emergency alert system. This is a public safety notification. Avoid the sound of bells. Lock all doors. Do not attempt to locate the source. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. The message repeated, but this time, the voice glitched, warping in pitch like a corrupted file. Avoid the sound of bells. Do not attempt to locate the so. Then silence. The static stopped. The radio turned off. I let out a slow breath, trying to push down the uneasy feeling creeping into my gut. Emergency alerts were rare, but I'd heard them before. Amber alerts, weather warnings. But this was different. Avoid the sound of bells. What the hell did that even mean? Was this some kind of prank? A hacked signal? I reached for my phone, still balancing the wheel with one hand. But of course, there was no signal, just an empty row of bars mocking me. The storm must have knocked out the towers around here. I was still processing the message when I heard it. A bell, faint, distant, so distant that at first I thought I had imagined it. A single, hollow chime carried through the wind. I straightened in my seat, my eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness behind me. My foot eased off the gas slightly. Another chime. Closer. A church bell? No. Too soft. Too deliberate. I shook my head. No. It had to be something logical. Maybe a wind chime on someone's porch, rattling in the storm? But that didn't explain why my radio had warned me about it. The next chime sounded even closer. My skin prickled, a cold dread curling in my stomach. I tried to focus on the road ahead, but my pulse was drumming in my ears now. I was being stupid. It was just a sound, a stupid noise, and yet I hit the gas, pushing past the rising panic. I just needed to get out of here, find a gas station, find people. This whole thing was putting me on edge for no reason. Another chime, louder. I risked a glance in the mirror again, and my stomach dropped. For the briefest second, I saw something standing in the road behind me, a silhouette, tall, unmoving. Then my headlights flickered, and it was gone. I sucked in a sharp breath, my hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. No, I didn't see that. It was a trick of the rain, of the darkness. My nerves were getting the best of me. Another chime. I swallowed hard and kept my foot on the gas. I drove for another 15 minutes, hyper-aware of every sound, every shadow. The rain blurred my vision, my wipers barely keeping up. My muscles were tense, shoulders locked, my breath coming too fast. Then, through the sheets of rain, something came into view. A gas station. The neon sign flickered weakly, half the letters dead. It barely looked operational, but it was the first sign of life I had seen in miles. I pulled into the lot, my tires splashing through puddles. The station was old, one of those rundown places that probably hadn't been renovated since the 80s. The lights inside were dim, and I couldn't see anyone at the counter, but it was shelter. I shut off the engine and sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel, listening to the rain hammer against the roof of my car. My breath was uneven, my pulse still too fast. Then one last chime, clear, right outside my car. I froze. My hand hovered over the door handle. Don't look. The thought slid into my head so forcefully it felt like someone else had put it there. Don't look. My fingers trembled as I reached for the lock, pressing it down with an audible click. Outside, the rain poured. I couldn't see anything through the fogged-up windshield. A shape moved past the edge of my vision. My throat clenched. My body screamed at me to move, to drive, to run. But I was paralyzed, stuck in place as a cold weight settled over me. Another shape. No, not shapes. Reflections. In the puddles outside, in the wet sheen of my window. A tall figure, unmoving, watching me. The emergency alert repeated in my head like a broken record. Avoid the sound of bells. Lock all doors. Do not attempt to locate the source. My breath shuddered out of me. I closed my eyes. The bell rang again, right next to my ear. And then, silence. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached, staring straight ahead. The rain pounded against the windshield, thick enough to turn the world outside into a shapeless blur. But I knew something was out there. I had seen it. Not directly, no, my eyes had refused to focus on it. But in the reflection of the puddles, in the wet sheen on the window, I had seen the shape, tall, unmoving, watching. And then the bell had rung, clear and sharp, right next to my ear. And then, silence. I forced myself to swallow the lump in my throat. My heartbeat hammered against my ribs, my breath unsteady. I needed to move. I needed to get inside the gas station. Slowly, I reached for the door handle. My fingers trembled as they closed around the cool metal. I pressed the lock switch again, just to be sure. Then, with a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The rain hit me like a wave, cold and relentless. My jacket was useless against it, the water soaking through in seconds. I stepped out carefully, my boots splashing into a shallow puddle. The station was just a few feet away. I kept my eyes locked on the entrance, refusing to glance at the wet ground around me, refusing to check the reflections. Part of me screamed to run, but I forced myself to walk. Fast but controlled. I reached the door, gripped the handle and locked. I let out a shaky breath, knocking hard. Hello? No answer. The lights were on inside, dim and flickering, casting weak orange light across the dusty shelves. I could see the counter, old and cluttered, a small bell sitting next to the register. I knocked again, harder this time. Hey, is anyone in there? Still nothing. I swallowed hard, stepping back. The rain blurred the world around me, but I could still see my car parked nearby, the headlights casting pale beams across the pavement. My breath fogged in the cold air. Something was wrong. The place looked abandoned. No movement inside.
No attendant.
No sign of life at all. Then, chime. A single, hollow note echoed through the downpour. I stiffened. The sound wasn't coming from inside. It was behind me. I turned my head slowly, my pulse hammering in my throat. First, there was nothing. Just the storm, the road stretching back into darkness, the outline of trees swaying in the wind. Then the lightning flashed, and I saw it, standing just beyond the edge of the gas station's flickering lights. A figure, tall, unnaturally thin, wrapped in something tattered and flowing, like robes shredded by the wind. It stood perfectly still, face hidden beneath a deep hood. A single bell hung from a chain around its neck, swaying gently. It didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't even seem alive. But I knew it was watching me. The moment the lightning faded, it was gone. I staggered back, nearly slipping on the wet pavement. My breath came too fast, too shallow. No, this wasn't real. This was a trick, some kind of hallucination, a stress-induced vision from the storm and the emergency alert getting in my head. Then why did I hear the bell? I turned back to the door, gripping the handle in both hands, yanking hard. Come on, come on, it didn't budge. Chime. This time, the sound was closer, right behind me. I spun around, my back pressing against the cold glass of the door. The figure was gone, but something else had changed. The road I had just driven down, the one stretching back into the endless dark, was different. It wasn't just the rain making it hard to see. The streetlights were out. The trees lining the road looked warped, twisted, their limbs reaching in unnatural angles. And the road itself, it was cracked, faded, overgrown with weeds, as if no one had driven down it in years. I felt a cold weight settle in my gut. That wasn't how it had looked when I pulled in. Something was wrong. Chime. I turned back to my car, fumbling for my keys. Screw the gas station, I could make it to the next town. There had to be a motel, a diner, something. I just needed to drive. The moment I looked at my car, my stomach lurched. The headlights were off. I hadn't turned them off. The driver's side door hung open slightly, just an inch, and there was water pooling inside, like something had been in there. The keys slipped from my fingers, clattering against the pavement. My breath hitched, then a whisper, low, right against my ear. I didn't understand the words. They were garbled, warped, like a voice played in reverse. My body moved before my brain did. I lunged for the keys, grabbing them in a clumsy, shaking hand, spinning toward my car. Something shifted in the reflection of the window. Not me, something behind me, tall, moving closer. I yanked the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut, hitting the lock button frantically. My breath came in sharp gasps as I shoved the key into the ignition, twisting hard. The engine sputtered. No, not now. I twisted the key again, my foot slamming against the gas pedal. Come on, come on. Outside, the rain kept falling. The reflection in the glass didn't move. Then the car roared to life. I didn't hesitate. I threw it into reverse, tires screeching against the wet pavement as I backed up, my hands shaking on the wheel. I twisted the wheel, shifting into drive, eyes locked on the warped road ahead. I didn't look at the gas station, didn't look in the mirrors, didn't look at the figure I knew was standing there, watching me leave. I just drove. The bell rang one last time, and then the emergency alert came through the radio again. Emergency alert system. Avoid the sound of bells. Lock all doors. Do not attempt to locate the source. The static crackled, and then a second voice spoke. You shouldn't have looked. I didn't stop driving. Not to breathe. Not to think. Not even to wipe the rain from my eyes as it blurred my vision. My tires sliced through the wet road, spraying water onto the overgrown weeds lining the cracked pavement. My hands gripped the wheel with a force that made my knuckles ache. I needed to get away, away from that gas station, away from that thing, away from the bell. The emergency alert still echoed in my head. Avoid the sound of bells. Lock all doors. Do not attempt to locate the source. I hadn't just heard the bells. I had seen the source, and the last words that had come through the radio, words that weren't part of the alert, made my skin crawl. You shouldn't have looked. The road ahead stretched into the darkness, only barely visible under the weak glow of my headlights. My wipers swiped frantically at the rain, but it barely helped. The world outside was just black trees and an endless, winding path. And something felt wrong. I was driving. I knew I was, but I wasn't getting anywhere. I checked the dashboard clock, 2:37 a.m. I could have sworn I had been driving for at least 15 minutes, but the clock hadn't changed. A chill crept down my spine. I glanced at my phone. The screen flickered, the time frozen. No bars, no service, just a single notification from earlier. Emergency alert. Avoid the sound of bells. I licked my lips, trying to ignore the dryness in my throat. Maybe the rain was messing with my perception of time. Maybe the road was just that long. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't the same road I had taken before. I should have passed another town by now. A sign, a highway marker, something. Instead, the trees loomed taller, their shapes twisting into grotesque, skeletal forms in my peripheral vision. The road cracked and crumbled beneath my tires, as if it had been abandoned for decades. I pressed harder on the gas, my pulse pounding in my ears. Then, chime! My foot slammed the brake. The car screeched to a stop, my seatbelt locking against my chest. The rain drummed against the roof, the wipers slashing across the windshield in rhythmic swipes. I swallowed hard, my breath uneven. That hadn't come from my radio. The bell had rung somewhere outside. I stayed perfectly still, hands gripping the wheel, eyes locked forward. My headlights barely cut through the storm, illuminating only a small patch of road ahead. Nothing moved, but I could feel it. Something was there, watching, waiting. A primal fear coiled in my gut, an instinct older than reason itself. Don't look, the warning whispered through my mind, but my body was already betraying me. Slowly, against every screaming impulse, I turned my head to the side, and I saw it. Through the rain-slicked window, past the blurred reflections, a shape, no, not just a shape, person, standing in the middle of the road, mere feet from my car. At first, I thought it was a man. Tall, thin, wrapped in tattered black robes that fluttered despite the lack of wind. But then my headlights flickered, and I saw its face, or rather, the lack of one. The hood of its robes shrouded an empty void, a darkness that seemed to swallow the light around it. A heavy chain hung from its neck, rusted and worn, holding a single, small bell that gleamed unnaturally despite the rain. It didn't move, didn't sway, didn't breathe. The bell twitched. Chime. A single, soft note rang through the night. I gasped, my whole body jerking backward as if I'd been hit with an electric shock. My mind screamed at me to move. Move, move. I slammed the car into reverse, my tires screeching against the wet pavement. The figure didn't move, didn't react as I sped backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed to turn around. I twisted the wheel sharply, and the moment my headlights shifted, the figure was gone, just gone. My breath shuddered out of me in sharp, uneven bursts. My skin was damp with sweat despite the cold. What the hell was that thing? I didn't wait to find out. I threw the car into drive and floored it. The engine roared as I sped forward, the road a blur beneath me. I didn't care where I was going anymore. I just needed to get away. The road twisted, bent in ways that made no sense. At times, I could swear it looped back on itself, the same dead trees appearing over and over again. My headlights flickered, the rain distorting everything into a nightmare of shadow and motion. Then the radio crackled to life. Emergency alert system. Avoid the sound of bells. Lock all doors. Do not attempt to locate the source. I clenched my jaw. No shit, I muttered under my breath, trying to mask the fear in my voice. Then the voice changed. No longer robotic, no longer an emergency alert. This voice was low, guttural, like something scraping against metal. You're already too far in. I stiffened. My grip on the wheel tightened. You looked. The static crackled, warping into something that almost sounded like laughter. The headlights flickered again, and for a split second, the road was gone. No asphalt, no trees, just an endless, yawning void stretching beneath my tires. Then, just as fast, it snapped back into existence. I nearly lost control of the car. My tires skidded, the back end fishtailing before I forced it straight again. My pulse was a frantic, erratic beat in my chest. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. But the road ahead only stretched further, endlessly winding into darkness. There was no gas station anymore. No town, no signs, nothing. And somehow I knew, deep in the marrow of my bones, there never had been. The road wouldn't end, no matter how far I drove, how fast I pushed the gas pedal, how many turns I made. It just kept stretching forward into the darkness, twisting and warping in ways that didn't make sense. I should have reached another town by now. Should have passed a gas station, a motel, a road sign, something. But there was nothing. Just me, the storm, and the road that never seemed to let me go. My phone was useless. The screen flickered, showing nothing but "No service" in dull white text. The emergency alert still sat at the top, unmovable, like a permanent warning I couldn't dismiss. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying to control my breathing. Stay calm. I needed to think. Maybe I had taken a wrong turn in the rain, ended up on some back road that wasn't properly marked. Maybe chime. I flinched so hard I nearly lost control of the car. The bell rang softly, so soft it could have been mistaken for a trick of the wind. But I knew better. I clenched my jaw, refusing to look in the rearview mirror. I had already looked once, and that had been a mistake. The bell rang again. Closer. I could feel it. Something was in the car with me. No, not in the car. Around it. I forced myself to stare straight ahead, knuckles aching as I gripped the wheel. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. The emergency alert had been clear. Do not attempt to locate the source. I wasn't going to look. I wasn't. The rain thickened, turning into a near-solid sheet of water against the windshield. The wipers groaned under the strain, struggling to keep up. My headlights barely cut through the storm anymore. I slammed my foot on the gas. The car lurched forward, the engine growling as I pushed it harder, faster, and then the road ended. I barely had time to react. The asphalt simply vanished beneath my headlights, giving way to an abyss of pure black. I yanked the wheel hard to the left, tires screeching as the car skidded sideways. The momentum nearly flipped me, my body slamming against the door as I fought to regain control. I came to a stop just inches from the edge. Heart hammering, I sat there, panting. My hands trembled as I loosened my grip on the wheel. The road in front of me was gone, just gone, like it had been swallowed by the darkness itself. I swallowed hard, my throat painfully dry. I needed to turn around. Slowly, I reached for the gear shift, preparing to reverse. Chime. This time, the sound came from directly behind me. A whisper of breath brushed against my neck. A shadow flickered in the rearview mirror, and before I could stop myself, I looked. The second I did, I regretted it. It was there, sitting in the back seat. I couldn't see its face, only the deep, empty hood of its robes. The bell hanging from its neck gleamed in the dim light, swaying gently. It didn't move, didn't breathe, but I felt it staring at me. Something deep, something old. And in the reflection, I saw something worse. The road behind me, it wasn't the same road I had come down. It was cracked, ancient, overtaken by nature. The trees had grown into monstrous, twisting things, their bark split open like gaping mouths. The sky above wasn't cloudy anymore. It was empty, a void. I tore my gaze away, gasping. My pulse pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wasn't on a road anymore. Not my road, at least. The whisper came again, soft, right against my ear. You shouldn't have looked. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal. The tires screeched as I spun the car around, desperate to get away. The rain blurred my vision, the windshield wipers barely making a difference. I didn't care. I just drove, faster, harder. The bell rang behind me, the sound slicing through the storm. I knew it was still there, sitting in my back seat, watching, but I refused to look again. Not this time. I gritted my teeth, focusing on the road, or whatever was left of it. The path twisted unnaturally, doubling back on itself, leading me in circles. The emergency alert crackled through the radio again, distorted and warped by static. Avoid the sound of bells. Lock all doors. Do not attempt to locate the source. The message repeated, and then the voice changed, a whisper, low and distorted. It won't let you go. A shiver ran through me. I kept driving. I didn't stop, didn't breathe, didn't dare look at the mirror again. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the storm stopped. The rain vanished. The road evened out, turning smooth beneath my tires. I blinked, my breath coming in ragged bursts. Had I made it out? I risked a glance in the mirror. Nothing. No figure. No empty hood. No bell. The road behind me was normal again. And in front of me, a gas station. Not the same one. A different one. One that looked real. I let out a shaky laugh, barely able to process what just happened. I was exhausted, shaken. I needed to stop, even for just a moment. I pulled into the parking lot, my fingers aching from how tightly I had been gripping the wheel. The car sputtered as I turned it off, steam rising from the hood. The gas station lights buzzed weakly, flickering in the darkness. I let out a breath. Safe. I was safe. Then, chime. I froze. The sound wasn't coming from behind me this time. It was coming from inside the gas station. My eyes locked onto the door, and there, just past the glass, a small brass bell hanging above the entrance, swaying gently, ringing even though there was no wind. I swallowed hard, gripping the wheel again. The emergency alert had told me what to do. Lock the doors. Do not attempt to locate the source. I hesitated. Then, the door to the gas station creaked open on its own, and from the darkness inside, a voice whispered, "You looked." The door to the gas station stood open, yawning into a darkness that didn't belong. A soft chime rang from the brass bell above the entrance, even though there was no wind, no movement, just the unnatural stillness of the night pressing in around me. I sat frozen in the driver's seat, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my fingers had gone numb. The emergency alert had told me what to do. Lock the doors. Do not attempt to locate the source. And yet, here I was, parked in front of the very thing I should have been avoiding. Something had lured me here. The road had twisted, changed, led me in endless circles until it decided to spit me out in this exact spot. A place that shouldn't exist. I stared at the gas station, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. The lights inside flickered dimly, barely illuminating the rows of empty shelves. The counter sat abandoned, a register covered in dust. A few ancient candy bars lay scattered across the surface, their wrappers faded and brittle with age. It looked wrong, like a place that had been waiting for someone to step inside. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. And then, chime. The bell swayed again, softly, insistently. I sucked in a sharp breath. I needed to leave. I reached for the keys, my fingers fumbling as I twisted them in the ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. No, I twisted the key again. Nothing. Again. Still nothing. Panic surged through me like ice water. I checked my phone, still no signal. The emergency alert remained frozen on the screen, the words unmoving, unwavering. Avoid the sound of bells. I clenched my jaw, my pulse hammering against my skull. I could stay in the car, wait, hope that whatever was happening would end on its own. But then, through the rain-speckled windshield, I saw something move inside the gas station. A shadow, gliding between the empty aisles. My breath hitched. I wasn't alone. The shape drifted past the shelves, slow, deliberate. I could only catch glimpses of it in the flickering light. Long, thin limbs wrapped in tattered black fabric, its head hidden beneath a deep hood. A bell gleamed at its throat. It turned toward the door, though I still couldn't see its face. It knew I was here. I swallowed hard, my mind screaming at me to do something. But what? Run? The road behind me led nowhere. The car wouldn't start. My phone was useless. I was trapped. Chime. The figure inside took a slow step forward. I reached for the lock button on my door. Too late. The gas station door creaked open further, and from the darkness inside, a whisper drifted through the rain. You looked. My entire body went rigid. I didn't think. I just moved. My fingers yanked at the handle, throwing the car door open as I stumbled out into the night. The air was thick, suffocating, as if the storm had swallowed all the oxygen. I couldn't stay here. I bolted, not toward the gas station, not toward the road, just away. My feet pounded against the cracked pavement as I sprinted toward the back of the building, lungs burning. The rain had slowed to a mist, making everything hazy, unreal. I reached the corner and pressed myself against the cold brick, panting. My heart slammed against my ribs. Silence. Nothing moved. For a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had lost it. Then, chime. I squeezed my eyes shut. It was close. Too close. I turned my head, just enough to see the edge of the gas station's front entrance. The door was open wide now, and standing just inside the threshold was the figure, still, silent. The bell at its neck swayed gently, though there was no wind. I clamped a hand over my mouth, forcing myself to stay quiet. It hadn't seen me, not yet. I just had to. Crunch. My breath hitched. I looked down. Under my shoe, broken glass. A fragment of an old, shattered light bulb. The figure moved, faster than anything had the right to. 1 second, it had been standing in the doorway. The next, it was right there, a breath away. I ran. I didn't think, didn't look, didn't hesitate. I tore across the pavement, legs screaming, lungs burning. My only thought was away, away, away. But the bell chime followed me. The sound rang in my ears, distorting, growing louder with every step I took. I reached the back of the gas station, skidding to a stop as my stomach dropped. Dead end. A rusted chain link fence stretched across the lot, its metal warped and twisted. Too high to climb. No way around. Trapped. I spun, pressing my back against the fence. My breath came in sharp, panicked bursts. The figure was there, just beyond the corner. I could feel it. I bit my lip, trying to steady my breathing. And then, chime. It was right in front of me. The hood loomed, a void of endless black. The bell swayed, its golden surface gleaming with something wet. Something that looked far too much like blood. Couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, from the depths of that empty hood, a whisper. You heard it. My vision blurred. The world tilted. And before I could even scream, everything went dark. I woke up choking on silence. Not just the absence of sound. Something deeper, something wrong. It was like my ears had been stuffed with cotton. Like the world itself had stopped making noise. My own ragged breaths felt distant, muffled, as if I were underwater. I wasn't in the gas station parking lot anymore. I wasn't anywhere I recognized. The ground beneath me was smooth and cold, like stone. But when I reached out to touch it, I felt a nothing. No texture, no temperature. Like my fingers were grasping at the absence of existence itself. I forced myself to sit up. My limbs were slow, sluggish, as if I were moving through molasses. My head throbbed with a dull, relentless pressure. And then I saw it. The road, not the one I had driven down. Not the endless, looping stretch of highway that had led me here. This one was different. It was old, ancient. The asphalt was cracked and crumbling, long veins of darkness spreading through it like rot. Faint, skeletal lines of faded paint still clung to the surface, but they didn't match anything I'd ever seen before, like markings from a time that no longer existed. The road stretched forward into a black fog, thick and unmoving, swallowing everything beyond a few dozen feet. There were no buildings, no landmarks, no sky above, just an empty, endless void pressing in from all sides. And the worst part, I wasn't alone. Something was standing in the fog. A figure, wrapped in tattered black robes, its face hidden beneath a deep hood. A bell hung from its neck, gleaming softly in the dim, unnatural light. I sucked in a sharp breath and stumbled to my feet, my heartbeat a frantic drum in my chest. My legs nearly gave out, but I forced myself to stay upright. I needed to run. I needed to get out, but my body wouldn't move. I could only stand there, frozen, as the figure took a slow, deliberate step forward. The bell at its throat swayed gently. It didn't ring, not yet, but I knew it would. And when it did, something terrible would happen. I forced my body to move, to do something. I took a shaky step back, then another, and then, chime. The sound was soft, almost delicate, but it ripped through me like a knife. My vision flickered. The world shifted. For a split second, I wasn't standing on the cracked road anymore. I was somewhere else. A living room, warm, familiar. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, its twinkling lights casting soft shadows across the walls. A fire crackled in the fireplace. And on the couch, my mom, sitting with a book in her lap, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, sweetheart." I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. This wasn't real. Couldn't be real. Mom had been dead for 6 years. My voice came out in a broken whisper. "Mom?" Her smile never wavered. "It's okay," she said gently. "You can stay. Just for a little while." My heart clenched. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I wanted to sit beside her, to hear her laugh, to let myself believe, just for a moment, that none of it had ever happened, that I hadn't lost her, that I hadn't spent the last 6 years trying to fill the void she left behind. But something deep inside me screamed that this wasn't real. That if I stayed here, if I let myself believe, I would never leave. The world flickered again. I gasped, stumbling as I was ripped from the illusion, back to the cold, dead road. The hooded figure was closer now, just a few feet away. My legs trembled, but I forced myself to stay upright. The bell at its throat swayed, waiting. I clenched my fists. I wasn't going to let it take me. Not like this. I took a slow, shuddering breath, forcing myself to speak. "Who are you?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised one long, skeletal hand and pointed. Not at me, at the road. I followed its gesture, my stomach twisting. There, just ahead, another figure stood in the fog. A second hooded being. And beyond that, more. Dozens. Hundreds. Stretching into the blackness. Each one standing silently. Each one waiting. I swallowed hard, my throat painfully dry. This wasn't just a road. It was a path. And these things, they were leading me somewhere. The figure closest to me stepped aside, clearing the way, inviting me forward. A choice: follow the path or refuse. I glanced behind me. The road was gone. There was nowhere else to go. A cold sweat trickled down my spine. I could feel something pulling at me, urging me forward, whispering in a voice I couldn't quite hear. I took a step. The hooded figures didn't move. I took another. The fog seemed to breathe, shifting around me, swallowing my footsteps. Then, chime. My body locked up. A flood of images crashed through my mind. Flashes of things I didn't understand. A procession marching through the centuries. Names lost to time. A bell that never stops ringing. Path that never ends. And at the very end of it, darkness. I gasped, shoving the vision away. My breath came in ragged bursts. I couldn't do this. I wouldn't. I turned on my heel and ran. The figures did not follow. They didn't need to, because as I sprinted into the void, I realized the road was still beneath my feet. No matter how far I ran, no matter how fast, I was still on the path, still following it. And somewhere ahead, waiting in the darkness, the bell rang again. Chime, chime. The sound rippled through the darkness, sinking into my bones. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was pulling me. I ran harder, my breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. My muscles screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. Every instinct I had screamed that if I let the sound reach me, if I let the bells toll for me, I wouldn't exist anymore. Not in the way that mattered. I didn't know where I was going. The road beneath me stretched endlessly, vanishing into the fog. But no matter how far I ran, the hooded figures remained in the periphery, standing in silent rows along the path, their bells swaying without wind. They weren't following me. They didn't need to. I was moving toward them on my own. That was the worst part. The realization made me slow for just a moment, my steps faltering. And that's when the ground shifted. I didn't fall exactly. It felt more like the world beneath my feet tilted, forcing me forward, dragging me down the road whether I wanted to move or not. The tolling of the bells grew louder, no longer soft, distant chimes. Now they were heavy, deep, resonant, vibrating in my chest. I squeezed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was inside me. I staggered forward, my vision warping. The fog pulsed around me like something alive. My head throbbed. My pulse was erratic. My heartbeat barely my own anymore. I felt something else in my chest. Something big. Something that wanted out. And then, for the first time since I had woken up in this place, a voice spoke. Not from the figures. Not from the road. From the air itself. "You have heard the tolling." I went rigid. The voice was layered, distorted, ancient. It wasn't a single voice. It was many, countless voices speaking as one. I swallowed hard, my throat painfully dry. "Let me go," I croaked. A moment of silence. Then, "There is no leaving." I shook my head violently. Bullshit. I turned on my heel, willing the road to change, to twist, to break. But it didn't. Stayed beneath me. The fog loomed, pulsing, shifting. The voice returned. "You heard the bell." I clamped my hands over my ears again. "I didn't mean to. That does not matter." I squeezed my eyes shut, a new kind of horror creeping up my spine. "You don't get to make that choice," I whispered. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. Then, we do not choose. The bell does. I let out a shaky breath. No, I wasn't accepting that. I wasn't just going to give in. I forced my eyes open, staring into the endless fog. Then what the hell does it want? I demanded. The voice didn't answer right away. For the first time, I got the feeling that it was thinking, or maybe remembering. Then it spoke again, slower this time. To be heard. The words sent ice down my spine. I shook my head. What does that mean? The fog shifted. The tolling bells hummed in my skull, low and deep, rattling my teeth. You are one of many, the voice said. You are not the first. You will not be the last. I clenched my jaw. That wasn't an answer. That was a warning. My heart pounded as I turned in a slow circle, scanning the fog. I had to think. I had to understand this. I was here because I heard the bell. The figures weren't attacking me. The road wasn't letting me leave. And the bell had chosen me. Why? What had I done? I thought back, trying to piece it together. The gas station. The road that led me there. The emergency alert. The warnings. I followed them. I hadn't gone looking for the bells. They had found me. A horrible thought gripped my chest. I had spent so much time trying to escape this place. But what if that wasn't the way out? What if I was supposed to listen? My breath hitched. No, that was insane. The warnings had been clear. Avoid the sound of bells. But what if the warning wasn't meant to keep people safe? What if it was meant to keep people from knowing the truth? I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I had a choice. Keep running, keep fighting, or I exhaled shakily and took a step forward, toward the sound. The road pulsed beneath my feet. The fog thickened, swirling like something living. The tolling grew louder. I reached the first figure. It stood completely still, towering over me, its face hidden in the depths of its hood. The bell at its throat gleamed softly. I hesitated, and then slowly I reached out. My fingers brushed the cold, metallic surface. The moment I touched it, everything exploded. A flood of images crashed into my mind. Not memories, not visions. Something older, something endless. A procession through the centuries. A road that never ended. A bell that never stopped ringing. The first toll, the first traveler, the first who had heard its call. Long before me, long before anyone had ever spoken the warnings. And the thing that waited at the end of the path. A door that had always been closed. A door that had to stay closed. I gasped, wrenching my hand away. The figure in front of me moved. For the first time, it raised its head. And in the darkness of its hood, I saw my own reflection. I stumbled back, my pulse roaring in my ears.
No, y whispered.
The figure tilted its head. You have heard the tolling. I shook my head. You have seen the path. I clenched my fists. And then, in a voice that wasn't entirely my own, you will ring the bell. My stomach dropped.
No.
The fog pressed in. The road beneath me rumbled. The tolling bells surged, louder, heavier. A cacophony of sound filling every corner of existence. The figures stood motionless, watching, waiting. For me, the bell in my chest began to ring, and I realized with dawning horror I was already part of the procession. The bell inside me rang. It wasn't a sound. Not exactly. It was a sensation, an understanding, a shift in reality, in perception. I clutched my chest, gasping as the vibrations rippled through me, pulling at something deep inside. I could feel it settling in my bones, rewriting something fundamental, twisting me into something I didn't want to be. The figures stood motionless around me, watching, waiting. I shook my head violently. No, I wasn't part of this. I wouldn't become part of this. I staggered backward, but the road beneath me had changed. It was no longer cracked asphalt, no longer something I could recognize as part of the world I knew. It was ancient, made of black stone, worn smooth by time and footsteps. So many footsteps. The fog pulsed as the tolling of the bells grew heavier, deeper, shaking the air itself. I turned, desperate, searching for an escape, and that's when I saw them, the others, people. They marched in silent procession down the endless road, their faces blank, their eyes empty. They were all different ages, different backgrounds. Some in modern clothes, others in garments from centuries past. All of them had the same thing around their necks, a bell. Their footsteps were slow, synchronized, as if something was guiding them forward, something unseen, something inevitable. My stomach twisted. They had all heard the bell. They had all tried to escape, and they had all failed. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. I wouldn't end up like them, couldn't. The hooded figure closest to me tilted its head. The bell at its throat swayed gently, soundless. I forced myself to look it in the face, to look at the reflection of myself staring back from the void of its hood. And I asked the only question that mattered. How do I stop this? The figure remained still. Then slowly, it raised one skeletal hand and pointed, not forward, not toward the road, but down. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. What does that mean? I rasped. The fog thickened, swirling around my feet. The other figures in the procession continued their march, their eyes empty, their bells silent. The road rumbled beneath me, and for the first time, I felt it. Something beneath the stone, something massive, something alive. My pulse roared in my ears. I had been so focused on running, on escaping, on trying to find a way out. But what if the answer wasn't in leaving? What if it was in breaking the road itself? The realization hit me like a thunderclap. The road was a prison, not for me, for whatever was beneath it. And every step taken by those who walked it, every ring of the bells, was bringing it closer to the surface. The figures knew, the ones who walked, the ones who led the procession. And now I was one of them, unless I stopped it, unless I broke the road. A deep, shuddering breath rattled out of me. I didn't know how. I didn't know if it was even possible, but I had to try. The alternative was becoming one of them, becoming part of the march, the endless procession, and eventually becoming something worse. I clenched my fists. The bell at my throat pulsed. A test. I wasn't supposed to fight it. I was supposed to accept it, to fall in line, to walk the path. No, I reached up, my fingers wrapping around the cold, metallic surface of the bell. I squeezed and pulled. The moment I did, the figures reacted. For the first time, they moved. Hundreds of hooded heads snapping toward me at once. Hundreds of empty faces tilting in unison. The road rumbled violently, cracks splitting through the stone. The thing beneath it felt me. It knew what I was doing. I gritted my teeth, yanking harder. The bell didn't budge. A shadowy hand clamped around my wrist. I gasped, twisting, but the figure was faster, stronger. More of them stepped forward, reaching, grasping, dragging me toward the road, toward the procession. I fought, but the bell was still ringing inside me, dulling my movements, slowing my thoughts. I was losing. I was becoming one of them. I screamed, thrashing, my mind racing. I couldn't let them take me. Couldn't wait. The bell chose people. It marked them. I had spent so much time trying to remove it, but what if I rang it myself? A desperate idea. Terrible idea. But maybe, just maybe, it would work. Before the figures could stop me, I grabbed the bell at my throat and rung it. The sound was deafening. A single, piercing chime that split the air, tearing through the fog, shaking the ground beneath my feet. The hooded figures froze. The road shattered. The stone cracked wide open, deep fissures spreading in all directions. And beneath it, I saw it, a mass of writhing darkness, shifting, twisting, pulling itself toward the surface. The thing beneath the road, the thing the bells had been keeping imprisoned and also feeding. My breath caught in my throat. I had broken the road, but I had also woken it up. The figures turned their empty faces toward me, and for the first time, they moved toward me, not as mindless marchers, not as silent watchers, as something else entirely, as protectors, not of me, but of the thing beneath the road, the thing I had just set free. A deep, guttural noise rose from the pit, vibrating through my skull. Not a growl, not a roar, something older, something that had been waiting for this exact moment. The figures lunged. I turned and ran. The bells screamed in my ears. The road crumbled beneath my feet. The procession was no longer marching. It was chasing. I had done something worse than join them. I had become the thing they hunted. And whatever was beneath the road, it was finally free. I ran. The The ground beneath my feet cracked and shifted, stone slabs crumbling away into the abyss below. The sound of bells was everywhere now, clanging, screaming, a chaotic, discordant chorus that sent shivers through my bones. The figures chased me, their movements no longer slow and deliberate. They were fast now, impossibly fast, their robes billowing as they closed the distance between us. But they weren't just chasing me, they were running from it, from the thing I had awakened beneath the road. The cracks in the stone widened, and I risked a glance back. I shouldn't have, because now I could see it, a mass of writhing, shifting darkness, moving like liquid shadow, twisting and curling into grotesque shapes that barely held form. Eyes flickered open and shut across its surface, too many to count, blinking in sickening unison. And the bells, they weren't just ringing anymore, they were screaming. The sound was raw, agonized, a wail of something ancient and broken, something hungry. My chest tightened as I sprinted forward, leaping over a jagged gap in the road. Ahead, the fog swirled violently, distorting the landscape. The road itself was coming apart, breaking down like an illusion unraveling, revealing the endless void beneath. There was nowhere to go.
No escape.
I was trapped. The hooded figures surrounded me now, their faces still voids, their hands outstretched. I skidded to a stop, panting, my lungs burning. One of them stepped forward. "You have done what cannot be undone," the layered voice murmured. I swallowed hard. My hands curled into fists. "You never told me the truth," I hissed. "You let me think the bells were hunting me, when really, they were keeping that thing locked away." The figure did not move. "You were given the warnings," it said. "You did not heed them." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Oh, screw you. You never explained anything. You just let people wander in here, let them hear the bells, and then punish them for it." The fog pulsed. The figures remained silent, and the thing in the pit moved. The massive, shifting darkness surged, dragging itself up through the broken road, peeling free like something shedding an ancient cocoon. The sight of it made my head throb, my thoughts warping. It wasn't just a creature, it was many, 1,000 shifting forms trapped within one massive, endless thing. Like every person who had ever heard the bells had been consumed by it, their essence added to its grotesque, ever-changing shape. I gritted my teeth. I wasn't going to let it take me. The figures began to move again, stepping toward me. I braced myself to run, but then something happened. The tolling changed. A single, deep chime rang out, so powerful it sent cracks rippling through the air itself. I stumbled back, pressing my hands to my ears. The figures stopped moving, and then they turned, not toward me, toward it. The entire procession shifted as one, their attention now focused solely on the thing that had escaped. A strange, awful silence followed. For the first time, the hooded figures moved with purpose. They stepped forward, toward the writhing mass of darkness, not to run, to contain it. I stared, my breath catching in my throat. They weren't here to hunt me. They were here to keep it from reaching the world. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. These weren't mindless creatures. They were prison guards, and I had just broken the cell. I took another step back, my heartbeat hammering. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The closest figure tilted its head. "You have seen," it said. "You have heard. And now you must choose." I swallowed. Choose what? The tolling bells echoed around us, their sound different now, urgent, final. "The road must be rebuilt," the figure said. I felt cold. I already knew what that meant. "You need another prisoner," I murmured. The figures did not deny it. "The procession must continue," the voice said. "The toll must be paid." I shook my head.
No.
The fog swirled violently. The road beneath me groaned. The writhing thing screeched as the figures moved toward it, their outstretched hands crackling with something, power, something that burned and seared as they forced the darkness back toward the pit. But they needed a final piece, a final sacrifice. They needed me. I staggered back, my mind racing. There had to be another way. There had to be. Wait, I still had the bell. I reached up, feeling the cold metal at my throat. It was no longer pulling me, no longer forcing me forward. Instead, it was waiting, a choice, a tool, a key. The figures were trying to repair the road, to seal the thing away. But what if I could do more than that? What if I could end this? I had rung the bell once before, and it had shattered the path. But if I rang it again, with intent, with understanding, maybe I could do what the figures couldn't. Maybe I could seal the thing away for good. My hands trembled as I grabbed the bell. I could feel its power humming beneath my fingertips. Ancient and vast. This was it. My choice. Becoming part of the procession, or ending the procession forever. The figures surged forward, trying to stop me. The thing in the pit let out a horrible noise, twisting, stretching, lunging toward me. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the bell and rung it. The sound that followed wasn't a chime. It was a rupture, a blast of raw, deafening finality that split the air apart. The fog exploded outward. The figures collapsed. The road broke, not in destruction but in erasure. And the thing beneath the road screamed. The bell vibrated in my grip, growing hotter, heavier, until I could no longer hold it. Pulled away, floating, rising, cracking apart, and then everything went white. I gasped, choking on air. Falling, falling, falling. I woke up gasping. The first thing I felt was the cold, not the damp, suffocating fog from before, but real, biting cold air that stung my lungs and burned my fingertips. I was lying on my back, hard ground beneath me, not stone, not the road, just dirt, just earth. I forced my eyes open, blinking rapidly against the pale gray sky above. The air was thick with the scent of rain, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could hear nothing. No bells, no voices,
No footsteps.
just silence. My breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as I sat up, my head pounding. Where was I? Had it worked? I turned, taking in my surroundings. I was on the side of a road, a normal road, cracked asphalt, faded white lines, the kind you'd see cutting through some forgotten stretch of backwoods. Tall trees lined both sides, their bare branches swaying gently in the wind. The fog was gone, the procession was gone, and the bell. My hand flew to my throat. It was gone too. I exhaled shakily, my hands clenching into fists. I had done it. I had escaped. The realization hit me all at once, knocking the breath from my lungs. I had survived. I wasn't marching. I wasn't part of the procession. And most importantly, that thing beneath the road, it was gone. I didn't know how I knew. I just did. I had rung the bell one final time, and instead of binding me to the road, it had shattered everything. The figures, the prison, the creature itself. It was all gone. The weight of it all slammed into me at once, and I doubled over, pressing my forehead to my knees as I tried to steady my breathing. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt free. But instead, I felt empty, like something inside me had been taken away, or worse, left behind. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to my feet. My legs were stiff, weak, like I hadn't used them in days. My clothes were damp with sweat and dirt, but they were still mine. No robe, no bell, just me. And yet, something was wrong. I couldn't explain it, but I could feel it. A hollow, aching sensation deep in my chest, like I had lost something, or maybe like something had lost me. I shuddered, rubbing my arms as I turned in a slow circle. There were no cars, no buildings, just an empty stretch of road leading into the trees. But then, movement. I stiffened. Far down the road, barely visible through the distant haze, a figure stood at the edge of the trees, watching me. My stomach twisted. It wasn't hooded. It wasn't part of the procession, but I still knew it because it was me, a perfect reflection, standing motionless in the shadows, its face blank, its posture rigid. My breath hitched in my throat. No, I had escaped. I had won. Hadn't I? The figure didn't move. It just stared. And then the sound of a bell, faint, distant, but real. My veins turned to ice. Slowly, carefully, I took a step back. The figure tilted its head, the exact same way the hooded ones had, the exact same way I had. I swallowed hard. My pulse thundered in my ears. I couldn't stay here. I had to leave. I turned and froze, because now the road behind me wasn't empty anymore. Figures stood there, hooded, silent, dozens of them, hundreds, their faces still hidden, their bells still absent, but they were waiting for me. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. I had shattered the road. I had destroyed the path. So why were they still here? I looked down at my hands. Something burned in my palm. A brand, a mark, a reminder. The toll had been paid, but the procession never ended. It just changed. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped my lips, ragged and hollow. Of course. I had escaped the road, but I hadn't escaped them, and I never would. I turned back toward the trees, toward my reflection. It was still there, still watching, and this time it smiled. A deep, distant chime echoed through the forest. Not the screaming toll of before, not a call to march, just a whisper, a warning, promise. I took one last, shuddering breath and stepped forward, toward my reflection, toward my place in the procession. The bells didn't need roads. They only needed someone to hear them, and someone always would.